One of the things I heavily struggled with when I was first starting out in game all those years ago back in Nigeria was my fear of rejection. I genuinely was terrified to be rejected by women. I was genuinely afraid of the prospect of having my advances neglected or ignored or just completely flat out rejected by any woman, especially where I grew up in. Nigerian women are Olympic gold medalists when it comes to rejecting men, especially making those men look foolish in public. So I didn't want to deal with the rejection itself. I didn't want to deal with the possibility of getting embarrassed in public. I didn't want to deal with the anxiety and the nervousness that would come with being in a situation like that. I would even go out of my way from time to time to try to figure out how to completely sidestep rejection or the possibility of it, or just eliminate the possibility of rejection from my gaming experience in general. Unfortunately for me, though, I found out that that's not possible, right? Rejection is an inevitable part of how interactions between men and women work. That's just a part of it. You can't get rid of rejection. But I did do something that is close. I did do something that I would consider just as good. And that is, I found a way to deal with my actual fear of rejection. And today, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about what that fear of rejection really is, where it comes from, how it works, why it's there, and how to actually deal with it. Okay, let's go. Fear is the language of the unknown. To fear something is to not know about that thing. That is why you fear it, because you don't have knowledge of it. So in order to alleviate fear, you must first make the unknown known. Fair enough. Okay, that means we should probably figure out what this rejection thing is. So, what is it, rejection? We say the word all the time. What exactly does it mean? Well, we can think about rejection as an unfavorable outcome. It is something that happens that you don't want to happen, right? It's something that happens when you make an advance, in this case, in this context, towards a woman, right? And that advance is rejected. That advance is clamped, you have a speed bump or just a straight up wall in front of it, the rejection or the advance is rejected, right? Okay. If that is the case, then it makes perfect sense that you would actually have some kind of an unfavorable feeling or emotion towards rejection in general. That's the first thing I want you to understand. Don't feel bad about yourself for having some kind of adverse reaction towards the concept of rejection. It makes sense that you wouldn't like rejection or that you wouldn't want to be rejected. It's okay. With that said, though, I do put it to you, and this is important, that rejection is not real. Yes, I mean it. Rejection isn't real. And a big part of why you fear rejection so much is because you think it's real. But I'm about to change that for you right now. Let's go ahead and clear up that misconception, shall we? Rejection is not real. Rejection is but a figment of our imagination. And I'm being serious when I say this. Check it out. Don't forget, we're talking about the context of a man and a woman, right? Man, woman. I saw someone in the comments say they were tired of me drawing stick figures of men and women. Apparently, for them, it's gotten old, and I respect their opinion, but fuck you. Anyway, man and woman. Whenever an exchange is happening between the two of them, there's a possibility of rejection. The problem, though, is that rejection that may come from the point of view of the woman towards the man is not real. How do I know that it's not real? Because of the creature we're dealing with, woman. Woman is an emotional creature. Woman is a creature that doesn't have any permanence to it. This is something you always have to remember. One of the fundamental laws of female nature, call it FN, not for fuck nigga, just female nature, FN. One of the fundamental laws of female nature is the fact that they have no permanence. Permanence. That is to say that they are not solid in their decision making, in their emotions, and in the way they perceive things or perceive people, perceive you. Right? Perception is reality. If the way that they perceive you always changes, then that means the reality of you in their mind also changes as well. The idea of rejection in itself is a permanent kind of concept. Rejection in itself implies permanence. To be rejected, there's a in the back of our minds a sense of finality there. The problem is that can't be the case because again, we're dealing with a creature that doesn't actually operate in finalities or permanence. We're dealing with a creature that changes her mind from 8 a.m. to 12 noon and then from 12 noon to 12:01. Okay? That's the creature we're dealing with. So there's no permanence with them. So whatever rejection they give you, whatever that may look like, is not permanent either. Right? What's the saying? Whether a woman says that she loves you or she hates you, they are both. They are both temporary. And that's the point. That's the point. They're temporary. Rejection is not real because the rejection is coming from a creature that doesn't operate in permanence, right? Now, if this is true and rejection isn't real because it's coming from a creature that can't give it any real solidity, right? Then why do we still fear it? Where is this fear of the rejection coming from? Well, there's really two major reasons for that. Two reasons we fear rejection. The first one is the more deep rooted one, I would say. We'll call it the biological reason or the evolutionary evolutionary reason, the evolutionary psychology reason. The reason based in evolutionary psychology. And that reason is a lot simpler than you might imagine, right? Think about it like this. The whole point in the study of evolutionary psychology, and I've always thought of this as very ironic too, by the way. Check this out. I've always thought the name evolutionary psychology is kind of misleading because the name itself is evolutionary psychology, which implies that it's talking about the way our psychology as human beings have evolved over time. But if you look into the study of evolutionary psychology, a lot of it is just telling us how much we haven't changed at all in millennia, right? Um, as much as we have evolved our way of thinking, our operations, our biology in some ways, the things that drove our ancestors to certain kinds of actions and decision making still drive us till today, right? So that's, as a side note, why I've always thought the name evolutionary psychology is very misleading. Ain't nothing evolved about our psychology, bro. Ain't nothing evolved about that. But back to this. The first reason for why we fear rejection is evolutionary psychology, and that's because back in the day, let's go all the way back to caveman days, right? We, well, not us, but our ancestors were chilling in tribes, right? They existed in tribes. And this is important that you understand this because not only does this explain our fear of rejection, but a lot of our behavior today. Chilling in tribes did and performed two major functions for us. One is probably the more important function: increase our chances of survival. Right? As human beings, we are a creature that deals in collectivism in groups. That is to say that we increase our chances of survival by cooperating with each other and sticking together. That is how we move as a species. That is why we are such a successful species on the planet. We're what, 8 billion people now? How did we do it? Because we found a way to collaborate with each other. We found a way to exchange value with each other. And as a result, increase our leverage on the planet and survive and thrive. We're at this point, we're thriving, right? We're very successful when it comes to our biological replication. Okay, that's the first one. The second one, and I would say the lesser of the two reasons, is really our ability to have more control over the mate we select, right? When you're dealing with smaller tribes, you have more control over that. But again, you can't even begin to do that if you don't first deal with survival, right? So that's why it's the lesser of two, because you first need to deal with survival before you can start worrying about replication, right? But back to the main point. We're dealing in tribes, living together, cooperating with each other, replicating, and so on and so forth. Here's the thing though, in dealing with each other and on a subconscious level, understanding that we increase our chances of survival when we're dealing with each other, when we're cooperating with each other, we also develop this fear of ostracization or exile. Fear of exile, which means we work better and we survive better when we're all together. If for whatever reason you are singled out and separated from the tribe, now you're all alone by yourself, you have significantly reduced your chances of survival, which is not a good thing. It becomes significantly harder for you to survive out in the wilderness by yourself or outside of the cave, whatever the situation may have been. And it becomes very easy for predatory animals that were obviously eating human beings at the time to catch you. You didn't want that. So you needed to not just make good with the tribe on some level, which is where a lot of our collectivist groupthink behaviors that we have today come from, right? Getting good with the other members of the tribe, making sure everyone likes you, that need to be liked, that thing you feel. Yeah, that's where it all comes from on an evolutionary level. But also, just making sure you don't step on anyone's toes, right? To the point where you might end up doing something that makes everyone begin to see you as not someone they want to keep in the tribe, right? So it all comes down to that fear of exile. Your fear of rejection is essentially connected to that fear. The fear that you might be rejected by someone feeds into our biological fear that we might be rejected by the tribe as a whole, right? Because dealing with one person in the tribe back then didn't mean just dealing with that one individual. It meant dealing with the rest of the tribe as well, right? Everyone had to be that careful. So that's the evolutionary psychology reason, right? Although this is the deep rooted, deep seated reason, you can already see how irrational this is in many ways. Because for the most part, a lot of the concerns that our ancestors had, we don't have anymore. It makes no sense to still be scared of exile or ostracization because in this day and age, you can survive a lot better, significantly better, without the aid of any other person. Now, granted, we're still a collaborative species. We still need each other to survive. Literally everything that you take for granted today, all the conveniences you have on a daily basis, came from someone else. So don't get it twisted. We're still very much so a collaborative, cooperative species. Everything you ever want in your life will come to you by way of other people. I promise. Right? With that said, though, it's a lot more convenient. We don't have to deal with the elements or wild animals or other things that were out to get us the same way our ancestors did. So for the most part, the consequences of being exiled by the tribe are not only not as prevalent anymore, but they're also pushed further into the future. The consequences aren't as immediate. So this fear that renders this fear that you have of rejection on an evolutionary level kind of stupid, isn't it? Exactly. It's irrational. It's irrational. But even though that this is the deeper rooted one, the other reason, the second reason, would be the more pressing need for today, for this day and age. And the second reason is you don't feel valuable enough. Here's a beautiful thing about how interactions between men and women work. For the man to genuinely, there we go. Gotta, oh wait, actually, I should probably give her wavy hair this time. There we go. She's wavy. For the man to genuinely feel like the rejection does not sting, the rejection he may get from a woman does not sting, he has to put himself on a mental plane where he believes that the rejection leads to her loss, not his. A different way of putting it is like this: a lot of men walk around with this feeling of unworthiness and not feeling like they're entitled or deserving of a value that they can get from a woman. They don't feel like they're good enough. And that in itself is where the rejection or the fear of getting rejected by women come from, because they feel guilt. They associate asking for value from a woman with guilt, because in their minds, they believe that they are not actually deserving of what they're asking for. So they feel guilty asking for it to begin with, and also at the back of their minds are hoping they don't get caught trying to get one up on the girl that they're asking this value from, whatever the value might be. All right, whether it's companionship, romantic relationship, sex, etc. That guilt in itself of not feeling good enough, or not feeling like you match up, or not feeling like you're deserving of what you're asking for, will naturally lead to a fear of rejection. How ironic is that, right? Is that you would think they'd be more accepting of the rejection in that case, right? You would think someone that feels guilty about asking for something wouldn't feel too bad when they get rejected for it. But the human psyche is interesting. When you genuinely feel guilt around something, it still stings bad when the rejection happens. That's the irony to it. Instead of preparing themselves mentally for the rejection, they try their best to run away from it and find a way to sneak themselves into deservingness. And that's not going to work. That's not going to help. That doesn't help anybody. That's never helped anybody. So let me teach you how to deal with this. Let's not actually talk about what you have to do to get rid of that fear of rejection. And it's understanding this second reason right here. The second reason is the main one, because it's not as irrational a fear. And that you do that by recognizing your value. That's pretty much it. As simple as that sounds, that's it. That's all you need. Here's why. Once you recognize your value as a man, asking for value in return doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel like you're doing something wrong or trying to trick someone into giving you something you don't deserve. And as a result, if for whatever reason you do get rejected in that scenario, guess what? You feel no fear. It doesn't sting anymore. In fact, it doesn't even occur to you as a possibility to begin with. And then even if it does happen, it doesn't matter. It doesn't register as a bad thing or a negative outcome, right? Why? Because you know you represent value. You know you're the shit. You know walking up to that girl, saying hi to that girl, sliding her DMs, whatever it is that you do these days. You know that you're the one that represents all the value. You know that her life is the one getting significantly better because you are now in it. So if she rejects that possibility of having her life be 10x by your presence in it, who's losing here? Not you. And that's the point. See, understanding your value and recognizing your value and accepting that you are deserving of amazing value in return in itself is more than enough for you to change the way you look at rejection for the rest of your life. That's it, right there. You combine those two, recognizing your value with remembering that women are not a permanent creature, and rejection itself is not this real consequential thing that has any real permanence to it. All of a sudden, what you're left with is nothing but amazing levels of confidence. It's nothing but this feeling of knowing that every single life you touch when it comes to dating women is changed significantly, changed forever, because you're now in it. Now, this is all easier said than done. Obviously, this is all easier said than done. There's a lot of bad habits that we have and a lot of misconceptions that we carry around with us that do not serve us. And we carry these things around with us on a daily basis, and they hinder us in our progress, in our dating lives, and in our lives in general without even realizing. I have a perfect solution though. And don't worry, it's not going to cost you anything. I call it Self Belief 2.0. It's a massive upgrade from my previous course, Self Belief. This is the massive upgraded version. I've been announcing it for a while now. It is finally out. The link is in the bio. And like I said before, it is completely free. You owe me nothing for it. You do not have to pay for it at all. Just go ahead, click that link in the bio, register for it, and begin to download all the information that you need to begin to understand all the bad habits you have, strip them all apart one by one, and begin to show forth what you really are at your core, which is someone that has astronomical levels of belief in yourself. Click the link in the bio, go register. It's been Jason, favorite scientist. Do with all this information what you must.